In a world where Ubisoft gave us this masterpiece and went from a respected game developer to slightly ruin its reputation and becoming a meme of what not to do when making video games, yeah, they really did pick the wrong title for this game because the unity that was shared with fans for this beloved franchise disappeared into the abyss.
Oh, I forgot. You're broken. I don't want to play with you anymore.
Anyway, between the release of those two games and Ubisoft's insistence on releasing the same game with a new location every year, there was another beloved franchise called Splinter Cell that had a new game coming out in 2013. The seventh installment of the Tom Clancy Splinter Cell series is a sequel of Tom Clancy's Conviction and was released on the 20th of August 2013. You play as Sam Fisher throughout 10 hours of the single-player campaign, and there are additional 14 co-op missions also available during the campaign, but for the purpose of this review I'll be focusing on main story missions in the campaign only. The seventh installment of the Tom Clancy Splinter Cell series is a sequel of Tom Clancy's Conviction and was released on the 20th of August 2013. On a personal level, and the main thing I remember about Splinter Cell Conviction is that Sam is super pissed the whole time due to his daughter's apparent death, and the whole game just reminded me of that one movie with Hugh Jackman in called Prisoners, where he's constantly shouting anger.
Where's my daughter? Where's my daughter?
So anyway, in this video the first thing I want to talk about is the story and characters. The campaign of Splinter Cell Blacklist takes place 6 months after the events of Splinter Cell Conviction. You play as Sam Fisher throughout 10 hours of the single-player campaign, and there are additional 14 co-op missions also available during the campaign, but for the purpose of this review I'll be focusing on main story missions in the campaign only. Sam Fisher works for his friend Victor Costi at the Paladin 9 Security, and unknown to them they are the first target of the Engineers, which forces Sam to team up with Grim, Isaac and Charlie in order to stop the Blacklist attacks. The story itself is quite engaging and the characters are likeable enough to keep the experience exciting, running cutscenes. However, I found the look of Sam Fisher strange, and in my opinion he had the worst character model out of all the main characters in the story, which was just kind of jarring because it took me out of the scene a bit, and as I couldn't take him seriously, as he looked, well, I mean, like a video game character, I suppose, which feels a bit weird to say, but the other characters looked realistic enough to a certain extent where you kind of expect the main protagonist to also look good enough, and even, I mean, the sharpest of them all, because that's the main character. So moving on to antagonist, the main antagonist is Sharik, and of course he's British because the game was released when the entertainment industry decided that our accents were perfect for the villains in like everything. You know, I mean, Mark Strong, Christopher Lee, Tom Wilkinson, I mean, I could go on. Funnily enough, Sharik does what every bad guy does in the movies, you know, when they're going to kill the protagonist and then they give an hour-long speech so that the hero can escape alive so the plot can move forward instead of actually having a decent set of writers behind them, but I digress. As this is a video game, so I'm a bit more forgiving of it. So, the next section is gameplay. I played this game on my Xbox One via backwards compatibility and had no issues whatsoever. Having completed the game, it's a mystery to me why this game didn't perform well. Maybe the market just didn't want stealth games at the time, or maybe people were let down by Conviction, a game I personally loved, although when I'm playing this game I can understand why people didn't like Conviction, as it doesn't offer the vast amount of stealth options that Blacklist does. For example, in Blacklist you have a lot of options when picking your loadout before a mission, and you can customize these to suit your playstyle, for which this game allows 3 types. There are the Ghost class, which is basically like always non-lethal. There's Panther, which is my preferred playstyle. It's basically where you use the Karamanbat, which is the Indonesian knife that Sam uses, and then the silent pistol. And then finally Assault, which is basically where the game turns into a third-person shooter, but I wouldn't recommend this as shooting mechanics are quite stiff, which makes the playstyle quite hard to pull off unless you're playing on easy. I was also impressed with the funny characters that seem to go hand in hand perfectly with each other, and the amount of cutscenes as a story for me is the number one pull when playing a game. For example, maybe Last of Us and Mafia 2 and Red Dead 1 and 2 are some of my favourite games ever. And obviously, consistent with those is that they've got amazing stories. But that's not to say that the gameplay isn't important, because it is. If the gameplay isn't engaging, then I'm not playing it. So I was glad that Blacklist had enough to keep me around. I was a bit worried about this because obviously it's 7 years old now, so I was skeptical, but they delivered. However, as mentioned before, the gun mechanics can be a bit annoying, and they needed some work, to be honest, to be a bit more refined. But the foundations are there. I like the fact that you can climb onto a ledge and aim your gun over and shoot maybe enemies, and I also like how the meter that builds up that allows you to execute. I think it's 3 in a row. You can have 1, 2, or 3, and if you let it build up high enough, it goes to 3, and you can use that basically as a quick time event, which is really cool. I just wish the gunplay in the actual game itself felt like that execute mechanic, where it's very slick and fast, because I just found myself kind of taking ages and ages and ages to aim and shoot. Talking about stiffness as well, the game does suffer from the way it wants you to do things. For example, when you want to leap over a ledge, you have to find like the exact spot so that like I said, I wasn't an expert, so you have to find the exact spot, and then A appears, and you press A, and then you jump, rather than just climbing up. So, like, for example, there was one bit when I was climbing up a ladder, and I was just expecting it to finish the kind of animation, but instead he stopped, and the game waited for me to press A so that we can move on. I just thought that was a bit annoying. I was like, can we just, get on with it? Although saying that, I did find that when you're in a high stressful situation, it was quite helpful if you forgot to kind of slow down. But again, I think I would just prefer it if I had that control rather than making me press A. One thing the gameplay does really well though is it allows you to mix and match, like I mentioned before, the 3 different styles, and it lets you mix and match these styles, so you don't have to just stick to one. You can do all 3 if you want, or just one. So my favourite gadget, because I like playing stealth gameplay, the best gadget I found for this was the drone, as it allows you to basically fly around, take enemies out with this like sleep dart, so a non-lethal option. It's a really nice option to have, as it allows you to see all the enemies before jumping in. With Sam, you can kind of scout the area and then decide what you're going to do next. It's kind of like a good planning method, whilst also giving you an advantage at the same time. There was also a sticky camera as well, which allows you to basically throw a camera to a surface and it attaches to it and then attracts enemies by making a noise. So you can basically press a button, you call them over, it makes a noise, and you can take them out with 3 options. There was, I think, gas, explosions, and electrocution. These options give you plenty of kind of ways to play the game and allow you to kind of, if you want to go back and replay it, you can. Not just because of the sticky cameras and the drones, but there's way more stuff, like a lot of stuff I couldn't even use because I just didn't feel like it was needed. And a lot of the missions do recommend what they think is the best for that mission. So I kind of just went with the game's recommendations a lot of the time, or just went for the stealth options because I felt, well, I don't want to run around gun blazing, so I'm going to pick the stealthy options. One thing that was strange though about this game is that about probably halfway through, they end up just giving you most of the stuff. The reason this is strange is because you have an option to buy it. So when you go on missions, you get paid for the completing the mission and how you play. So if you do really well in Ghost, you get more money, which is a bit of a criticism because if you want to just go through, you get less money. But I mean, if you're going to just go through guns blazing, then you don't need as much money because you're not going to be buying all the different options. Anyway, basically, you get to about halfway through the game and they were just giving you most of the stuff. You'd either like find it in a mission or you'd just get given it by someone. And it basically kind of made this whole getting paid thing a bit pointless because if you're going to give me the weapons, why are you paying me as well? Like, or have separate weapons that aren't on the list that I can buy. I think that just made it a bit more interesting. And also in my playthrough, I basically just stuck with a silenced pistol, as I found that using that was most suited to the Panther playstyle, which is what I attempted. Obviously, with any stealth game, you always start out trying to avoid everyone or trying to get through areas without killing people, but then one person spots you and it all goes mad. So I normally kind of started trying to do Ghost. It wouldn't work, so I'd switch to Panther, and I very, very, very rarely went to All Out, just kind of guns blazing. Now that I mention it though, and kind of building on that last point, one thing I did like was the smart AI. I thought the AI in this game is better than a lot of games that I've played recently, and that's kind of pretty impressive for, well, a 7-year-old game made by Ubisoft, considering that they've just brought out stuff like Ghost Recon Wildlands, which has got probably one of the worst AIs that you could just imagine. Anyway, so I have this one instance where I went through a vent and they went to the other side and basically stopped me coming through. So they didn't know I was in there, but what they were doing is they were thinking, oh, well, he's gone through that vent and this vent leads over here. So I'm going to go to this other side and check. And obviously it stopped me in my tracks really, because I was going to go through the vent and then I was like, oh, I can't go that way unless I'm going to cause a disturbance. So I kind of turned back around and basically try to find another route to complete the mission. This was on normal difficulty as well, so it wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. But they seemed to kind of adapt to the way that you played. Another thing I really enjoyed about this campaign as well is it does a really good job of providing kind of more variety at the right time. So just about you're doing the same thing and it's about to get bored and they kind of chuck something else in there, so it keeps it fresh. One example I can think of is sometimes you'll play as different characters, but in a way that fits the story. So, for example, one thing that comes to mind is where you play as Grim, and she's basically on a computer, and you have to save Sam and Briggs whilst they're being chased. So she basically shoots these missiles and blows these people up so they can get away. But yeah, this kind of broke the campaign up nicely and stopped it from getting repetitive. There was another mission as well, which revolves around you stealthily trying to find a guy in a house in order to gain intel on the engineers. This mission specifically was fun, but if all missions had been like it would have gotten old eventually, which was nice, which is a good way of breaking it up. So they have different missions for different sections, and it made sense to the story. But my favourite mission in the campaign was the mission that asks basically Sam and Briggs basically have to go on this kind of mission together and defuse these bombs that the engineers had planted. It's basically reaching the climax of the story. And the reason I really enjoyed this was because you played in first and first person, which was like quite a subtle thing to do, but it switched it up so that you and Briggs felt a lot different and gave you a new kind of refreshing mission structure to keep me engaged basically and keep me playing. But yeah, and it added a bit more difficulty to it as well because when you switch to Briggs, you're not expecting it to be first person, so you've got to kind of use all the same controls, as silly as that sounds, but in first person, and it's quite jarring to start with. So it was quite a nice, new, refreshing thing to have, so that you were kind of learning how to play the game again, as opposed to just having the same old mission rehashed, which I felt was really clever actually to do. It reminded me a bit of The Witcher 3, where you switch Geralt to Ciri, and although it doesn't switch third to third person, it's kind of the gameplay is a lot different. So, would I recommend this game? Yes, definitely. I think it's definitely worth if you've got an Xbox and you've an Xbox One or whatever. They're all backwards compatible now, so I would definitely recommend. Just I don't know. I bought it from CEX for like £4. If you're in a different country, you can probably get it on Amazon really cheap. But yeah, I definitely recommend it if you haven't played it or if you want to revisit it. It's definitely worth the time. And obviously, it's £4. It's £4. So if you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please like, share, and comment. Subscribe if you want to, or don't. But yeah, until next time, thank you and bye.